What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 109 of Nintendo Noise, Split Screen Games Weekly Nintendo Podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. It's good to be back, and it's good to have the show back.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that we missed it last week. We recorded an episode, and then midway through, I don't know if you were aware, Pete, while you were away, Discord kept going down. And so we were in the middle of recording an episode. Discord was like lagging out and then just like shut off. And then we like moved over to something else, and then the audio wasn't recording properly. And so we like started that again. And by the time it was like we finally got it all working, Max had like 10, 15 minutes before he had to go because he was in the middle of moving house. So it was just like, oh god, okay.
Yeah,
So
the,
we had
the
like a 30-minute episode after like an hour and 15 of recording.
the fates conspired against Nintendo Noise last week, but we're here. We're here to make it up to you this week, and we're gonna have a banger of an episode. And of course, I know a bunch of you wrote in with questions specifically for Max to get some of his takes on some of the Switch 2 rumors and stuff we talked about the last couple weeks. Well, I'm happy to report he should be back at a more full-time capacity with us now that he is done with his move. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back on the show in the next couple of weeks, and he can answer all of your Nintendo Switch 2 questions again, and you can actually hear his responses this time around. But
Yeah, and I know he's the only one of us that's finished Tears of the Kingdom, which is why Andrew Valentine was writing in. Bug him in Discord because he told me that he's going to be more active in Discord. So if you want to talk to him, find him in our Discord. You can find the link on our website for Green Dog Games.
there you go. So we'll have to have him back on soon to chat about all that and more. But we've got some fresh news this week to chat about. Of course, we're gonna kick things off with the news that online services for Nintendo 3DS and Wii U are going to be discontinued as of April 2024.
I frankly was unaware that it was still online. So um, this was very much news to me. So I think it's fine personally. My gut reaction is like, okay, I guess all the people playing original Splatoon, it's a bit sad for them, but
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately the way that these things go, right? Like as we approach a new
yeah.
console generation, right? Like support for the older stuff is gonna fall by the wayside. And yeah, I mean, I think Splatoon is probably the big casualty, right? Like not to say that there aren't other online games on those platforms that people are or have been invested in, right? Like stuff like the original Mario Maker, stuff like that. But you know, a lot of those games as the sequels have come out, right, those communities and that activity has dwindled, but, like, we know that people still play the original Splatoon, right? And
Mhm.
it's a shame that I mean, it'll be gone. There won't be a way to engage with it anymore.
Genuinely though, I thought this had all shut down when the Miiverse closed down. Do you remember that was, like, I think
Yeah,
last year or the year before, and they shut that down, then they shut the eShop down. But, next year marks the 12th year of the Wii U's life. I think 12 years for online services is a pretty
reasonable.
reasonable time period.
Yeah.
It's lasted a whole generation of the Switch. We're probably gonna get the Switch 2 next year. I think if you can kind of hold on to your online services for an entire generation, I think that's fine.
I
I
mean,
also
it
kind of hope that this means that some of the archaic stuff that goes along with it, the
fingers
baggage,
crossed.
like the friends codes and things like that, maybe can be forgotten about and we can move on to a
We'll see.
new system.
We'll see. I mean, that would be nice. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but we'll see.
That's me
Um,
smoking that hopium again.
yeah, and I respect that. I'm glad. We're
Mhm.
we're very we're big on hopium around here. But the April 2024 number feels kind of interesting to me, right? Because that's our understanding is that, it's sometime early to mid 2024 is like when we may get, you know, our first look or maybe even our first hands on with the Switch 2. Maybe those things are lining up right there, right? Where they don't want to be supporting, four different SKUs at that point, right? Between the 3DS, the Wii U, the Switch, and its successor. It makes sense, right? There are some specific details I do want to provide here in case you are one of the people that are still out there playing on 3DS or Wii U. Like I know some of you do. I know we talk about it on the Discord. I know Chewy still out there playing some of this stuff. So what we know right now is, and this is directly from Nintendo, right? April 2024, online play and other functionality that uses online communication will end for Nintendo 3DS and Wii U. And that also does include all software that's exclusive to the new 3DS, which unsurprising. That also includes online co op, internet rankings, and data distribution. So that's not just online play, that will impact a few other systems. One of the ones that they did highlight was the Nintendo Badge Arcade, which is something that Steve and I were both like, I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure that I've heard of that. So
Yeah, I had to look it up. It's like crane game mini games that you can, like, get badges and stuff,
and
and
then you can use those to like customize your home screen and stuff, which like I kind of remember, but I digress. I am
cool.
very interested if anybody in the community uses this functionality. This sounds like the type of very weird bullshit that Chewy would be like very into. He has thousands of these badges, I bet. Right?
Yeah, quite possibly. It also says they're all just stored on the SD card, so I wonder if you can just download these online somewhere and just
So
shove them on your SD card.
what they said is so, and if you use Nintendo Batch Arcade, you'll know what we're talking about, right? So what we're looking at is if you try to launch it post the service closing down, you'll get an error result. You'll no longer be able to place badges in the badge box. So what that means is it says here, once the service ends, badges obtained in Nintendo Badge Arcade will continue to be available for decorating the Nintendo 3DS home menu. However, it will no longer be possible to place badges in the badge box, meaning that users will only have access to a maximum of 100 categories and 1,000 badges that are in the badge box. We recommend that users finish placing badges before the end of services for this software. And then they say that you can save them to an SD card, but if that data is lost, there will be no way to reclaim it. So if there's any malfunction, anything like that, you would lose all these badges and all this data. It would be impossible for you to get it back. So they suggest that you back up your SD and have multiple SD cards that contain that data if it's important to you that you maintain it. So
I'm gonna
there's your
guess then
PSA.
that someone's gonna shove it all online and you can just get these badges if you want to further down
Potentially.
the line. I
Yeah.
hope so anyway. I think that date's also significant because that marks the next financial year for Nintendo, and so I
Right.
wonder if this, like, lines up with them just being like, "I can't be bothered to
I want to tidy things
to
up.
budget up, like, another year of having to maintain these servers and keeping it all online."
Uh, it's also worth calling out. They do have a disclaimer here where they say, please note, they say, we will announce a specific end date and time at a later date, but please note that if an event occurs that would make it difficult to continue online services for 3DS and Wii U software, we may have to discontinue services earlier than planned, which is
I wonder what
interesting.
that would be.
And
Like,
like maybe that's just there as like defense, as like, hey, if we decide to do this, we warned you that that was a possibility, and they're it's
yeah, so
it's
you
it's
can't
PR,
sue
it's
us,
legal
yeah.
speak, right? You're protecting yourself if you decide to change plans. However, that feels pointed, doesn't it? That feels specific. Like what would that be? What would happen that would make it difficult to do, and then you'd have to discontinue
Well, I
it
wonder
early?
maybe it's some, like,
Strange.
new legislation or something. Because I know the EU has some, like, legislation and stuff coming in that
That's
means
true.
that, uh, Threads, for example, isn't even available. Instagram's new app isn't available in the EU to download because of some new legislation and stuff. So it could be that they have to discontinue it in certain regions and they could just turn it off sooner rather than later. It's interesting though, you mentioned that all of the services are going to be turned off. There's two apps in specifically that will continue to work after online services are ended, and they are Pokemon Bank and Poke Transporter.
Which is
And
good.
it's really good news. At what point do you think they get turned off? Because
I mean,
they can't go on in perpetuity.
it does say it will still be possible to use online services for the following software, but that may also end at some point in the future. I think it's inevitable that it will eventually end, but I think how I feel like for me, you don't end support of that until you make the old games that you need to complete a living Pokedex available on new software or on new hardware. Like you look at when they re-released gens 1 and 2, right? Red, blue, and yellow and gold, silver, crystal on 3DS, they played with the Pokemon Bank. So you could take your Pokemon at that point from any generation of Pokemon all the way back to the beginning, and you could bring it up to the modern era. And I think that they're gonna wanna maintain that functionality.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you draw that line, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I'd hope so. I mean, I think you can get them off now, right? Like that's the functionality is you can transfer them from the Pokebank
Correct.
to Pokemon Home,
To
right?
Pokemon Home, which is the new and Transporter is what you use to take Pokemon off of, the, Game Boy games. You can transfer or no, maybe that's not how that works. Maybe that's you have to do that on the DS and then you take the DS cart. I forget exactly, but Transporter is basically you can take Pokemon from the old games into Bank, and then you can use Bank to bring them to home.
Yeah, it looks like it comes from Gen 5, according to Bulba Garden.
Okay, so
They say
Transporter would be the one then that you use with Gen
with
5
the
to
virtual
move
console releases as well.
from the old games. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how that works.
That then goes into Pokemon Bank, and then you can take them from Pokemon Bank into and out of games, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like there should have been a simple solution for this. I don't know why they needed to rename Pokebank to, like, Pokemon Home.
It's because like, they're technically different they do different things now, and it's like it's a clear evolution of the service, but I think the real answer is that they're trying to make you be able to take data from games that were made in 1997 to games that are
Yeah,
made in 2023, and it's understandably a little bit difficult.
yeah, yeah. I can understand wanting to do that as a player, but I
Yeah.
can also understand the technical challenge that probably comes with that.
For sure.
Um,
But, like, it
I
is really cool when you have, I know, like, Trendy Brendy has talked about that, where, like, he has, like, the starter Pokemon he used in his first run of, like, Sapphire or Ruby or whatever in Pokemon Home now, you know? And it's like, it's
yeah, it's
been
really cool.
with him his entire career as a Pokemon trainer. That's really cool, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I never got into it. For me, it was all about the catching shit, so I never got attached to a Pokemon. I never trained them up. I never did any of that stuff. In those games, it's literally like, "Oh, I just wanna catch them. That looks nice. That's cute." And,
Yeah, like, I
I
have
evolved them, never cared about keeping them as they were. I know a lot of people refuse to evolve, like, their starter Pokemon.
I mean, like, I have the Pokemon I used in Gen 4 competitive saved, you know, and it's like a lot of them are not viable now or like they're using old sets, whatever. But it's like, oh, like I won a tournament with this Pokemon. Like like
Yeah.
I have those memories. I'm like, yeah, like I got my Registeel named Tubbs that I stole from my friend Jared. Like that's, I gotta have that on there. And when I say that, I'm gonna tell you the story because it's funny. Me and a bunch of my friends, right? We all bought an action replay so we could clone our Pokemon and give each other copies of the Pokemon we had developed because at that point EV training and breeding and everything was such a headache that when you got an actually good Pokemon, it's like, oh yeah, like let's share the wealth. We had one friend who would not share any of his Pokemon, and he was a total asshole about it. And and shout out to Jared, still a good friend of mine to this day. But we were all hanging out at my father's house, and we were like in my dad's pool, and two of my friends were like, okay, while everybody's outside, we're gonna steal his DS and go and clone all his Pokemon, and then trade them to everybody else in the group. And I just come inside, they're like, hey, go look at your DS, and I was like, oh, okay.
Oh
Just
my
a
god.
box filled
Did
with
did
his
he know about this? Did he find out? Or is
He
is it
found
still
out
like,
afterwards
okay.
because that afternoon we're like, oh, okay, like we're out of the pool. Let's all have some Pokemon battles. And all of us used his own Pokemon against him. And he was like,
Oh my
you sons
god.
of bitches. So funny.
I'd be so mad. I would be genuinely
He
so
was.
mad.
He was so mad. It was so funny though.
I
It's
think I
like
would
not
be
like he
Jared
lost
in that
anything,
regard,
right? Like
though.
he had all his Pokemon. So
Yeah. No, I know, but, like, it's the effort, it's the principle of it, right? It's
it
the
is.
principle of I trained them, they
Hmm.
were my Pokemon, and you've taken them, you've
And he
cloned
gave
them.
them all special names and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm
Oh
out there
my
using your
god.
Pokemon with the name that you gave it, whatever.
Were you able to change the names after the fact with the action replay, or were you stuck with the names that he gave
Ooh,
them?
with the action replay, you probably could edit it. But if it was another like in game, if you trade Pokemon with another person, you can't change the nickname if they had it because that's the original name.
Mhm.
But yeah, I
So
think
you're
with action,
literally playing with him with the same name
yeah,
Pokemon, so
oh
there was
yeah,
no way he didn't know.
no, he definitely knew, and it was so funny. I don't condone thievery, but I did benefit from it, so, I guess I was pretty complicit there.
I miss those kind of things. I really miss action replays and Game Sharks and,
Cheat
Game
codes were
Genies and
fun.
all of that stuff.
It's a
Yeah, they were
bummer.
great.
It's a bummer that they've fallen by the wayside because like, all the stuff they used to unlock is, like, extra features now, it's like DLC
Yeah.
and all kinds of
I
stuff.
imagine you probably can do that kind of thing with, like, modifying memory and stuff if you,
Yeah,
like, hack your Switch, for
totally.
example. But, then you can't go online, you miss out on a bunch of other stuff. It's
It was
like
cool when it was baked in, and,
yeah.
like, it was so cool when you'd play a game and you'd, like, unlock a secret character or something because you went on cheatcc.com or whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
that
Put
was
in the
that was
right
something.
combination or go in the cheats menu. Oh, yeah, I loved
Yeah,
all that stuff.
it was cool. So, just to hit the other Q&As real quick in case anybody needs this PSA, right? Will I still be able to play offline after online services end? Yes, right? All your games that don't require online play, you will be able to take advantage of and still use and download and everything, no problem. Are you also ending online services for software from publishers other than Nintendo? With some exceptions, online services will end for all Nintendo 3DS and Wii U software. Please contact publishers for information about the online services for their software. So that's like where Pokemon Bank and Poke Transporter like fall under, right? Those are Pokemon Company software. If they want to keep supporting it, it will be supported, right? So there may be some third party games that you can still take advantage of here and there, but that's going to be on a case by case basis that you'll have to figure out.
Mhm.
Will it still be possible to download, update data, or purchase software? For the foreseeable future, it will still be possible to download, update data, and re download purchase software and downloadable content from Nintendo eShop. So, again, it sounds like at some point that functionality will probably be discontinued, but for now, you're safe. So, get your games, back them up. You're all right. When online services end, will Street Pass and Spot Pass no longer be available either? Street Pass uses local communication between Nintendo 3DS family systems, meaning it will still be available even after online services end. However, because Street Pass uses online communication, because Spot Pass uses online communication, Spot Pass features will no longer be available. For example, you will be able to use Street Pass in Street Pass Me Plaza, which is pre installed on Nintendo 3DS family systems, but you will no longer be able to use features that use online communication, such as receiving new panels in Puzzle Swap. So
Interesting.
there's the long and short of it. Want to give you the PSA, and RIP to the 3DS and the Wii U. It seems like every day they get a little closer to being in the far rear view of history rather than being the last generation of consoles, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
12 years ago now. It's a long time,
Well, the 3DS even longer than that, right? When was the
right?
3DS released? Like, 2011.
I was
A
gonna say
long time.
2011, 2010. Yeah,
Yeah, long, long
my
time,
first year of
and
college.
like, that feels so much more of a generational leap than the Switch did on for the Wii U, like, in terms of a handheld. The
Yeah,
Switch is just, like, night and day next to the 3DS. It was the first time, like, I ever felt like I was well, not the first time, I felt like I was playing console games when I first booted up the PSP, but, the first time I could take massive games with me, like, I never thought I'd be able to play Skyrim on a handheld, and I can with the Switch, which is was awesome. It was an awesome feeling.
I think the Switch was the first time it actually met that goal. Like, you know how like back in so reminds me of this thing. I think Sierra sent it to me the other day or something, but it was a picture of like a PS1 skeleton like graphics, and it was like the PS1 can create like mind-blowing realistic graphics, right? And it's like, well, not really, but at the time it felt that way. And I feel like the PSP and the 3DS and the Vita, even to some level, like all those consoles had that air of like console quality gaming on the go. And it's like not really, but it felt like it. It felt like,
Yeah, it really
whoa, it
did feel
close
like
enough.
it, yeah.
But the Switch was the first where you're like, no, this is literally I'm
It is a
playing the game of
console.
the year
I'm
console
holding
quad.
a
Yeah,
console, yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
home console. And yeah, I mean, I think what handheld means now is such a different thing than what it meant every other
Yeah,
point in
yeah,
history.
because it used to mean, like, oh, I get, like, a watered down crummier version of a game I could play at home, right?
Or it was, like, dedicated to more, like, indie style experiences before that was even a thing, or, like, more like the like, old school kinds of games, right? Like, yeah, we don't make top-down Zeldas on console anymore, they're on handheld, right? Like,
It always felt like a few generations behind though,
that was
you
what it
know?
was, though, right? It's like
Mm.
like, Game Boy
Like, we're
comes
on the
out, right?
N64, but we're playing SNES games on the GBA, you
Right.
know, or the
Or
GameCube.
honestly, it was, like, kinda like more like GameCube and
Yeah,
SNES, but and
GameCube,
with
yeah.
N64, it was we're on 3D and 8-bit, right? Or we're on,
Mhm.
32-bit and
Yeah, I'm
8-bit,
playing
right?
still playing Tetris over here on the Game Boy
Yeah.
Color.
And it's like, on some level, we're kinda still there, right? Like, on our current gen consoles, we're playing 40, or 60 FPS, 1080p, or 4K, or whatever, and on the Switch, you're getting 30, you're getting
I
10,
feel like they're really
720.
different compromises, though. The fact that
Yeah,
the
you're right.
resolution's not quite the same and the frame rate's not quite the same, I can still play real top-notch games
Yeah,
on a
for sure,
handheld,
for sure.
and I think the Switch 2 is only gonna improve that another step.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we move on from the Wii U and the 3DS, I want to pull in a little icebreaker conversation. It's not the beginning of the show, but I'm putting it here anyway. Okay, because the real answer, I don't have a new name for this segment of when I have a random question to throw at you. So
Oh,
give me a
we
question.
need the audience to do it because they came up with a great name for replace question block on the Steam Deck podcast with Steam Docket. We need another name for icebreaker. What is an
Yeah.
icebreaker? I think we have to define what that is for people to
I
understand.
think for me, it's a question that is like it's not a from the question block. It's not a listener question. It's more of like an open-ended, evergreen kind of like thought-provoking question, you know? And I call it an icebreaker because I think of it as like when you're like at a new school or a new job or one of those bullshit things where they're
I
like, all
hate
right,
those so
everybody,
much.
sit in a circle
Tell us the
and
2 facts and a lie about
yeah,
yourself.
like
Oh,
it's that's the kind of vibe we're trying to cultivate here, though, right? Like it's like that, but questions you want to answer. So I think take from that what you will, listen, dear listener, and tell me what we should call this segment. But for now, it's an icebreaker. So we're gonna break some ice, Steve. I found this question over on the Nintendo subreddit, where one let me see, what was this guy's name? Oh, it's not loading. Mr. Nice Guy 26 asked the
mm.
question, what has been the defining game for each Nintendo console? And then gave a little bit of an explanation here, right? It doesn't have to be the best selling or best reviewed, just the game that in your mind defined the system when you look back on it as a whole. For example, I think Breath of the Wild defined Nintendo Switch. It was the first game on the system that due to massive acclaim, uh, it was the reason that many people got a Switch in the first place. Conversely, the Zelda franchise has now grown massively in popularity due to Switch and is now on Mario and Pokemon's level of commercial success. I think that's a strong case, and I'm inclined to agree. I'm inclined to throw that out right now. I would say Breath of the Wild is the defining game on Nintendo Switch. You may go back, years from now and think Tears of the Kingdom, but I
Yeah, I
would
don't think
say
so.
I think that this makes a good argument in that, like, Breath of the Wild was the first hit on the system up until its sequel. It was the game many would argue was the best on the console. It's arguably the best in the franchise history, definitely the most popular. I think you got to give it to Breath of the Wild for Switch.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah. And I think these aren't, your favorite games.
No,
It's definitely, like,
it's
the
what
games that
defines the console.
defines the generation, yeah.
Yeah.
Are
So
we going backwards or are we going forwards?
I dealer's choice. We could go backwards from now
Because
if you
I
want.
think I think going from the bottom up, like from NES to Switch is easier.
Yeah, I
Because I
agree.
feel like earlier in the generation, they were way more easy to define. Like,
We
NES
have
is Mario
hindsight
Brothers.
too, right? Like it's easier to be like, "Oh yeah, clearly 30 years ago, like this is the game," right? But like the Wii U is so recent, there's I think I,
I struggle
I'm
with that one, yeah.
I'm inclined to say for Wii U, I think it's either Splatoon or Mario Kart 8. And I'm inclined to give it to Splatoon because it was the new IP. I think it was one of the defining games on that console. And I think that up until the Switch, right? Like that was one of the defining things about Wii U was like Splatoon is really good. People love Splatoon. Splatoon's popping off. it's the hot new thing, and it was like people were so
Ye
excited for it to come to
Possibly.
Switch.
I actually kinda think it's Mario Maker. I feel like that
Oh,
was
that
the
did have a big
game.
moment.
It had a really big moment. I
Yeah,
remember Miyamoto going around doing the rounds, taking that piece of paper, showing everyone, like, how the original Mario game was created, and it really utilized the touchpad, like, the tablet, like, it took that to places no other game really did. I think
yeah.
for me, the Wii U is Mario Maker when I think about it.
I
But I do like Splatoon. I feel like Splatoon got more of a following on Switch. I'd be okay with Splatoon,
maybe.
but
I just feel like it was such a moment, and it was, like, so big in Japan, and, like, the way that it kinda I don't know, it came out and, like, really made a name for itself, and I feel like Mario Maker had a moment, for sure, but, like, I don't know that that moment lasted, right? Like, I remember there was that point where it was like, you know, Ross from Game Grumps was making levels, and everybody it was like a viral thing, everybody was playing these super hard but, like,
mhm.
that didn't happen with Mario Maker 2, right? Splatoon is still around. Splatoon came out and established the
Yeah, but
first
that's why I mean, I
meaningful
think
new
it
Nintendo
defines
IP in so long.
that's why I think it defines the generation with Mario Maker, because I feel like, that was one of the only reasons I wanted to get a Wii U. Like,
It
Splatoon.
also came to 3DS though, too, you know?
You're right, it did. But that was a real problem with most of the games on the Wii U, like, there was very little reason to buy a Wii U if you were more of a handheld player, because you could play most of the games on the 3DS.
At least a couple of them, a couple of the big ones, right? There's that and Smash and, a
Mhm.
couple odds and ends.
Yeah, but, like,
Hmm,
even stuff like Xenoblade came to 3DS, you know?
yeah, that's true. Hmm,
Let's give it to Splatoon, because I do think
okay,
it was a slam dunk,
alright.
hit. I just don't think it
I like
drew.
us coming to a consensus. I think that's more interesting. I think we
Yeah,
gotta pick a game.
I don't think it drew people into the console, but the people that had it, I think, were really big into it. At
Yeah,
least in the West anyway, but then I don't think much drew people to that console in the West.
it's true. 3DS, I'm kind of inclined to say New Leaf. I don't know if that's crazy. I feel like that really
I
is
could see that.
I I feel like Animal Crossing really found its legs on 3DS and, like, New Leaf was such a big game and, like, it was, like, bestseller, it had the really good DLC later on. There's people that still argue that it's the
Yeah.
best Animal Crossing, and I'm trying to think of, like, what are the other games from the marquee franchises on 3DS? And, like
Majora's Mask is the other thing I think of,
but, like, that's
that
an
was a
N64 game.
yeah, I know, but it was a big reason I know a lot of people picked up a 3DS for
Yeah,
was
no
so they could
doubt.
play Majora's Mask.
And, like, the Ocarina remake was cool, but it's just like, it's like those are remakes. Those are remakes of old games. I feel like
Yeah, New Leaf, I would agree with you. I think New
right?
Leaf.
I feel like it's New
Yeah.
Leaf. I feel like it's New Leaf. I
Yeah,
like that
because even the
choice.
Pokemon games on that generation weren't really like, wow, we're
Uninspired,
definitely for them,
like,
yeah.
it's like the first 3D Pokemon, that's cool, but it's just like, I don't know, like, I feel like Link Between Worlds is a really great standout release. It's the first, like, good but again, it's like, I don't know. I don't is that console defining? I don't know.
No, in the same way, I don't think 3D Land even is console defining.
No, and
Maybe a
I
Fire
fucking
Emblem
love that
game would
game. That might
be.
be the best game on the 3DS. I don't think it defines the console.
I think the 3DS. I think Animal Crossing. Yeah, New
All
Leaf.
right. Okay. Wii, I think, is easy. I'd say Wii Sports.
See, I was thinking it's either Wii Sports or the Virtual Console as a whole, because I really think the Virtual Console did a lot for that generation. It
Virtual
went
console is so
through
good.
with the Wii U as well. It was the first time you could emulate all these games legally on a console.
Ton of Japanese only releases coming over and stuff like that. I think that was the first official release of like Mario 2, The Lost Levels and stuff like there's a lot of cool shit there. I love that answer. I think it's fun and offbeat. I feel like it's cheating because it's not one game.
Yep, and it's that if I think about the Wii, it's definitely I'm thinking about Wii Sports and playing
Right?
bowling and sticking stupid plastic shit on a end of a Wii remote.
I think it's just like that is the game that communicated that gimmick so well. It was in all the marketing, like, there are still old people bowling on on Wii systems and, retirement communities and stuff like, the I think the Wii Sports was a movement in a way that, like, I
Mhm.
just think you can't ignore. Alright, DS.
It's 64 DS for me, Mario 64.
Interesting. Okay. Expound.
It was similarly to when the first time I played a PSP, right? And I only use that example because it was the first console I bought myself and played myself, and like was I remember it out. But same deal with the DS. I feel like I opened that up and I was like, "Holy shit!" I've just come from a GBA, and this is now what we get. Like, what an astronomical leap! I'm playing Mario 64 that I remember playing on a TV, just not so many years ago, and now I'm playing it handheld and I'm playing it on the go.
So I like that answer a lot. I think that's one of the better games on the console. But I feel like when we're trying to nail the like that defines the console, to me, that feels like a bit of an outlier because I feel like most of the best experiences on the DS, at least for my money, are not are not, whoa, console quality on the go. And it's like, I feel like it's more
Shit
of
like Brain Age.
it's shit like Brain Age,
Yeah.
it's Nintendogs, and I think if you wanna go for something, like, more traditional, I'd say it's New Super Mario Brothers, because like, that again, right? That game was massive. That game sold so
Mm.
many copies, and, like, it relaunched the 2D Mario franchise, like, that was such a moment for sure. I think I would give it to, like, Brain Age or Nintendogs, though, because I think more about the casual market and like them making games for new types of gamers and being like, we're going to make games that appeal to older people. We're going to make games that are marketed primarily towards young girls. We're going to make games that are primarily targeted towards older women. Like that was what is it? The blue ocean or whatever strategy. Like that is what I think of when I think of the DS, you know?
I would agree with you. The best-selling game on the platform is New Super Mario Brothers, followed by Nintendogs. I think for me, though, it probably would be Brain Age. I just remember so many people saying that.
Iconography is
Yeah.
so tied to the DS. I'm inclined to agree. Let's go with Brain Age. I think those other ones are solid reps, but I think Brain Age really like I think is a good poster child for that generation.
Mhm.
Shout out to
Thought
Picto
so.
Chat, by the way.
Oh, PictoChat's great. That was on my remember when we did the top 100 games list?
Yeah.
That was on my list. PictoChat was on the list.
Did you ever use Picto Chat like in a
All
meaningful
the
way?
time. Me and my brother in the car, we'd be on the way like, on our way on holiday or something, and we'd be, like, sending messages back and forth in the back of the car, like, it was so fun.
Dude,
It was great.
I
Loves PictoChat.
remember I had a couple friends that I had classes with, and we would we would like like to be texting each other in class on our in Chat. And I have this vivid memory of me and my friends who used to do our Pokemon tournaments. We did a big tournament every year and we would do like monotype battles. So each of us would have like a type, like I had a water team, my friend had normal team, whatever.
Mhm.
And I remember there was one night where we had done the tournament, and then we all stayed at a friend's house who had, like, hosted, and we were all, like, in bed, right? We're laying down all around the room with the lights off, and all of us just have our DSs open, and we're just drawing, like, these crass, gross pictures and seeing, like, who can make everybody laugh while we're all trying to be quiet and go to sleep. It's just so stupid, but it's, like, the type of shit you do when you're, like, a fucking, 12, 14-year-old boy just like fucking around with your friends. Good
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Good time.
Yeah, it was good.
All right, GameCube. This one I think is tough. There's a couple candidates that I think stand out. I mean, when I think about what is the game I think of immediately, it's Smash Bros.
Animal
Melee.
Crossing for me.
I think Animal Crossing is a defining game of the GameCube for sure. But like, I think to me, I think that when I think GameCube, I think about them upping the ante of a lot of existing franchises. It
Mhm.
was the Smash to the Melee jump. It was the 64 to Sunshine, which 64 is a better game, but Sunshine obviously beautiful, like fidelity wise, was a real upgrade. Like Wind Waker, right? And then Twilight Princess, like it was a lot. Luigi's Mansion, a lot of games that really like ooze style, and like HD, right? Like we're upping the ante graphically, like the art direction of these games is really important. And I think of Melee first because that game, it's still played. It's still one of the most played fighting games in the world, right? Like Melee cast such a huge shadow for years. And the GameCube controller is still the controller you use for Smash to this day. And
Oh,
that's because of Melee.
God, that controller fucking sucks. Like, I don't care what anyone says, it's awful. It's
It's perfect for
uncomfortable.
Smash.
It's missing buttons.
It's
It's
perfect for
terrible.
Smash.
I think the game for me is Resident Evil 4. I think it defines that generation. It's one of the best shooters of all time. It's one of the most beloved games in that franchise, and it was exclusive to GameCube for a very long time. They
That was a
managed to
huge
get
game on GameCube for sure.
yeah, they managed to get Resident Evil over to that console. And I think it defines a generation of Nintendo where they were struggling against the PlayStation, which had come out of nowhere against them in the N64 era, and they had to make deals. And I don't think I think it's either for me Resident Evil 4 or Animal Crossing, but I'm not a Smash player. I don't know that I think of that console as the Smash console. I think of the N64 as the Smash console because that's where it started, but I know that Melee is really the one that everyone
I
plays.
think Melee's the one where it became what it is, right? I think
Yeah,
Smash could have been a one-off fun thing. Melee is where it became what
there's
the
a
through line we still have to this day, I
I
think.
mean, it's a really difficult one because there's a lot on that console. You know, Metroid Prime's there as well that
Mhm.
made its
I
debut,
think of Wind Waker as being a defining game as well. Like that,
and
that
F-Zero, Pikmin, you know, all of those games in that generation, they had some really strong new IP. I even think of stuff like, Super Monkey Ball as, like, a
sure.
distinctly GameCube game from Sega. Um,
The Sonic Adventure ports, like obviously they were
yeah.
Dreamcast games first, but a lot of people played them on GameCube
Yeah,
because the Dreamcast did not hit like that, like
and Thousand Year Door as well, you
sure.
know?
The
Paper
GameCube has a
Mario about to
really
get a
strong
remake.
library. It has a
Yeah.
really and Thousand Years Door is another example of one of those games where it's like, oh, you liked Paper Mario, up the ante, right? Like it's
Mhm.
better, it's higher fidelity, it's a better script, it's longer, it's deeper. Um, yeah, the GameCube's got a really good library, really good
Phenomenal
library.
library. Absolutely phenomenal library.
I I feel like it's got to be Melee. I feel like it's got to be Melee for this one for me.
I really think it
With
should be Animal Crossing personally, but we've already got an Animal Crossing on the list, so we
you
can flip
down or
a
you want to
coin
flip
if
a
you
coin here?
want.
What are we
We can
doing?
flip a coin.
All right. Here's what I
Uh,
will do. I got a D20, 10 through 20, Smash 1 through 10, Animal Crossing, or do you want to go for Resident Evil?
I think I
I think Resident Evil's a better choice.
okay, we'll go with
I
Resident Evil
like
4.
Animal Crossing more, but I think again, we're talking about that defines the console. I think you made a better case for RE4 as being a defining game on that console
Mhm.
for me.
Okay. We'll go
Okay,
with
we'll do
Resident
it.
Evil 4 or Smash.
2. All right. We're going with
Resident
Resident
Evil
Evil.
4. Okay. Is that gonna be the only non-Nintendo game on
Uh,
this list?
Probably. I think so. Game Boy Advance is next. This is another one I find difficult.
I don't. It's Super Mario World. When I think of the GBA, that's what I think of. I think of playing Super Mario World. I personally think of playing Wario Land 4, but it's not. It's Super Mario World. That's what everyone was playing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's definitely
Because again, it was like, shit, I can play SNES games on the go now.
yeah.
I've
But
just come
again, then it's
from
like that is
garbage
just
and stuff.
that is just like
It's Super Mario Advance, though. You know, like it was a refreshed version of the game. It is a distinct title.
mm, I don't know. I feel like I agree with you on some level, but I don't like that answer. Cuz I
Why?
cuz I want to give that to the Super Nintendo. I would say is probably Super Mario World.
Oh, yeah, maybe I would think Link to the Past is the Super Nintendo.
Good answer. That's a good answer too.
Like, that is where we go back to as, like, that's the start of the Zelda
Are we
formula.
comfortable jumping around a little bit here?
Sure.
Okay. For NES, how do we
It's
feel
Mario
about
Brothers.
and do we maybe lock in Mario 3?
Mario 3? Oh, come
As
on. It's
like
the original Super Mario Brothers.
for sure, the original is unquestionable, but 3 is like I think 3 is like the best of that trilogy.
I
Kinda
think when you think of it, you're thinking World 1-1, playing Super
you
Mario
make
Brothers.
you're right, you're right, you're right. I like that. You're right. I'm giving it to you. Super Mario Bros. We'll go with for NES. Okay, last couple. All right, let's jump around. 64, Mario
It's
64,
it's Mario 64, like, it's
right?
nothing else. It can't be anything
It
else.
could be
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time.
No,
That's the
it
other
can. No,
option.
it can. You think of it and you think of Mario's goofy face coming up on screen and you're,
No
like, pulling
doubt. But
around.
come on. Like, Ocarina of Time has been like the fucking game that defined Zelda until Breath of the Wild. It's right up there. If it's not 64, it's Ocarina. But I agree with you. I think you go with Mario 64.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Game Boy, Pokemon
Tetris.
Red and Blue.
No, it's Tetris.
Oh, it's not. You're
The
crazy.
original Game Boy is Tetris.
They're combined. It's Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and it's
I
still
know.
Pokemon.
It's not. It's
It
Tetris.
is. You're so wrong. You're
It's the
so wrong.
best-selling game, one of the best-selling games of all
We're
time,
not
and
talking
I
about the
think
best-selling game.
the best game of all
We're not
time,
talking
and
about the
when I think of the GameCube, when I think of the Game Boy, I think of Tetris.
yeah, but dude, like the Pokemon single-handedly extended the life of the Game Boy by like fucking 6 years. Like like come on. There's no way. There's no way that it's not Pokemon. It has to be.
No,
It
no, it
is.
doesn't have to
Pokemon
be.
is
It's
a
Tetris.
worldwide phenomenon.
So was Tetris.
Was.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it, man.
We're talking about the game that defined the generation.
And
You know,
it's
if you wanna break
Pokemon.
this out to Game Boy and Game Boy Color, then give Pokemon Yellow its show on Game Boy Color, but
No! Get out of here. That's nonsense. Get out of here. Pokemon Yellow. No way. Hold on. I gotta look at this. We gotta look at. Let's see. Yeah, come on, man. It is also the best selling game.
how many copies?
Over 10 million more.
10,000,000 more. How many copies was it?
According to Wikipedia, number one Pokemon Gen 1 inclusive is 46 million plus. Tetris 35.
Yeah, 35,000,000 for Tetris, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was not as much as Pokemon.
Is that just on that console, or are they
Y-
lumping in all of the, like, reissues?
If you are adding reissues, that would literally only include on the 3DS, which I don't think it is because I'm sure it's much higher then. Because that's the only time it's gotten a straight port. Every other time that it's the re-releases are like their own games, right? It's a different
Mhm.
SKU. Um, uh, this is one I feel like I can't budge on. I think it has to be Pokemon. I think it has to
Man,
be.
I can't believe how long that handheld went, like, it
Dude, and that's the thing, right? Like I want to point this out, right? Tetris 1989,
yeah,
Pokemon 96, right?
I
And
know.
and guess what? The number 3 game is Pokemon Gen 2 Gold Silver Crystal 1999. That console lasted 10 years and it's
Well,
only
by
because
that
of
point, it
Pokemon.
was Game Boy Color, which was just a
Yeah, but
stopgap for
Pokemon
the
was the whole
advance.
reason that was a thing.
No, they wanted the Game Boy Advance, they couldn't make it work. We ended up with the Game Boy Color, and they carried on with the Game Boy Advance.
Right, but I'm telling you, like Game Boy Color, a huge part of why it exists is because of Pokemon. Pokemon breathed new life into the Game Boy. There's literally, you listen to interviews with the folks at Game Freak or even like Miyamoto and Wada and stuff at the time. The Game Boy was waning, and like the like Masuda, the creator of Pokemon, was telling people that they were developing a game for the Game Boy, and people were like, "Oof, really?" Yeah, that's kinda that it's old, right? That's old hat now. It brought it back. It made it a thing again.
I mean, the competition was the the Game Gear and the Sega Nomad,
Yeah, but
so
I'm
it
telling
didn't
you,
really
like
have
the
much to go up
console had
against.
had fallen off, you know? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't
Okay,
know.
fine, you can have it, but I really do think strongly that it's Tetris, which I think
I
is the
respect
best
that.
game of all time.
You got your Game Boy, you got your GameCube pick. We're playing a little ball here. We're playing a little
Hey,
ball.
Resident Evil 4 deserves to be on the list, you know? Even though I don't like the game, it defined the generation and other people like it.
I'm not here to speak ill of it. I'm just, defining. It's in the conversation. But I think you made a strong case for it. I do. And I think I would say Tetris is number 2. And I agree with you, if we broke these into 2 consoles, then it's easy. Game Boy, Tetris, Color, Pokemon, you're done. Easy
Mhm.
peasy. Although I guess Red, Blue, Yellow, technically not a color game. It worked on color, but it is a Game Boy game. It's
There
Gen
were a
2's a
lot of
color game.
games that were on color, but weren't color games
Right.
specifically, you know? And then they got reissues as well, like, you look at the deluxe
Like
version of
Link's Awakening.
Link's Awakening, yeah,
And it has like
and,
a
like,
whole
you
extra
get, like, a black
dungeon.
cartridge then, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great cartridge. Great cartridge. One of my favorites. Okay. So we got 2 generations left, and they're weirdly analogous. It's the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance.
They are weirdly linked, but I think the SNES for me, when I think of it, it's Link to the Past. It's Zelda Link to the Past, and we don't have a Zelda game on this list. And I know that we
We have
don't
Breath of
shouldn't
the Wild.
necessarily think that. Yeah, we do. That's fair. I really think that it's a Link to the Past. I think it inspired so many games. It inspired a ton of that for me is where you look back. I know a lot of people look at Ocarina of Time, but I think they nailed down the formula for Zelda on the SNES.
I'm going to give it to you. I think you make a strong case. And I think, like, Super Mario World, for my money, is like the perfection of the Mario formula. But I do feel like platformers more define the NES than the Super Nintendo. Obviously, there's tons of great platformers on the Super Nintendo. A lot of the key games are platformers or have platforming elements, no doubt. But I do think you're right that, like, on Super Nintendo, we did see more like
Adventure
JRPGs and
games and
action
JRPGs, yeah,
adventure
like
and
you like Chrono Trigger, and we got Mario RPG, and we got we got Zelda. I mean, Zelda. They weren't even sure of Zelda on the NES. Look at Zelda 2. Like they hadn't nailed it down, and then
yeah. Link to
with
the
A
Past
Link to the Past, they're just
cemented
like,
it.
this is what Zelda is.
And again, right, you're right. A lot of the tropes that you think of as being ocarina stuff do originate in Link to the Past, right? Like the dungeon order and like having specific items for, moving forward, that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, like those kind of Metroidvania elements. Yeah, I like that. So Game Boy Advance,
I think it's Mario Advance when I
I
think of the
guess.
Game Boy
Yeah, I
Advance.
guess. I don't know. I don't know that I love this answer, but I'm sticking with it. I think
Do you
it
just
feels
not
right.
like it because it's a game from another console that's, like, been
Yeah. It
re-released? But
feels
then
weird.
why do you feel okay with Breath of the Wild? It came out on the Wii U first.
No, it's
Like, bec
simultaneous. Come on.
Yeah, but,
That's not the same
it's
thing.
like you could say it defined the Wii U in the same way.
I guess I wouldn't
It
argue
was
that though.
developed as a Wii U game. It just
Sure.
happened by happenstance released on the next
I would
console.
argue that it's the opposite though. It was like it
Yeah.
by happenstance got released on Wii U more so than anything. You're not wrong historically, but I feel like I don't know about all that, right?
Mhm. What was
Anyway.
the best-selling game on the GBA? What do you think it was?
Hmm. Pokemon?
Yeah,
Pokemon.
it was Pokemon.
Is it Ruby Sapphire or is it
Yeah, Ruby Sapphire.
okay.
16 million. So a real jump down from its peak of 46.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. That's kinda crazy to me that that's the best and it's that low. I didn't realize the GBA was, like, that much smaller in penetration than the Game Boy, but
I mean, the Game Boy Advance sold 81 million units. The original Game Boy sold 118 million. So it's not that different, especially when you consider the how long its lifetime was.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
guess you've got the Game Boy Micro and the DS also play Game Boy games, and they were still making them, and there was a bit of crossover.
I think it speaks to the fact too that there was probably just a lot more options on the Game Boy Advance. Like obviously there's a lot of games on Game Boy, but I think the number of games on Game Boy that are like S tier games is probably less than the number on Game Boy Advance. So it would make sense that it was maybe a bit a wider spread, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so our final list here is NES, Super Mario Bros., Super Nintendo, Zelda: A Link to the Past, Game Boy, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, N64, Super Mario 64, Game Boy Advance, Super Mario Advance, GameCube, Resident Evil 4, DS, Brain Age, Train Your Brain in Minutes a Day, Wii, Wii Sports, 3DS, Animal Crossing New Leaf, Wii U, Splatoon, and Switch, Breath of the Wild. Great list.
I am curious, and I'm not saying you have to change the list. If you had to pick one Pokemon game for Game Boy of the colors, which would you pick
Oh, Blue.
and why?
Blue's
Blue?
mine. Yeah.
Okay. Not even
And
yellow? You don't want Pikachu?
no, I mean, I like yellow, but I think for me, like, blue was my first game, right? I like how weird and janky the art is, and, like, yellow yellow, I think, represents, like, the shift where Pokemon became a global phenomenon, and it started being a different thing over time, right? Like you see some of the edges get sanded off and it become a little bit more, you know, uniform and like streamlined and and like there are good elements of that, there's bad elements of that. I think the sprite work in that game is still beautiful, like it's great, whatever. But like there's something about the rawness of red and blue that still really speaks to me,
It's
you
like
know?
those early Simpsons seasons. Yeah, that's what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Right,
Yeah.
like season 1 and 2 where you're like, they haven't quite found it yet, but like there's something about it, you
Like,
know?
Homer looks a bit weird, Marge sounds a little bit different.
There's something
Yeah.
about it, you know? I like I don't know. I feel like it is such a bummer that like some of the danger in Pokemon has gotten kind of removed, you know? Like it feels so clean and squeaky and, like there's never a sense of danger or adventure the way that I feel like there used to be, where it's like you could die at any time if you don't have the right team of Pokemon. If you're not prepped for this adventure, right? Like it's you and your team of Pokemon and your wits against the world. Whereas now it's like
Mhm.
every 10 minutes there's some adult coming to, spray disinfectant on your boo-boo and give you a band-aid. And it's like, all right, okay.
And maybe they realized that, the story's not exactly, uh, very responsible, Let's just let the
So what?
children
It's
out into the
fantasy.
wild.
It's
I
power
know.
fantasy. Let the kids have
Yeah.
their little power fantasy. Anyway, that's my rant for today. We're gonna we're gonna move along. But before we do that, I'm gonna remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Asobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. And for today, I wanted to give a very special thank you to Pilkey, one of our Patreon producers, because on the Flip Screen Games podcast this week, I did not update the document before we recorded, and I did not give you your shout out. So I'm going to give you an extra shout out here and on the next episode of that show. Thank you for being a Patreon producer, Pilkey. Thank you for joining us. All right, Steve, we got another rumor that I want to run by you because it's a
Mm,
multifaceted one and it speaks to our interests in a couple different ways, I think here. Far
yeah.
Cry 7 is there's murmurs about it, right? We're starting to learn
Alright,
more
pause on
about it.
that.
Start
Pause on that. Before this rumor was available, was doing the rounds, did you care about another Far Cry game? Are you still interested in this franchise?
Here's my thing. I don't know, right? Cuz like a bad game, I'm going to be out from a bad game. But if we get another Far Cry, if Far Cry 7 looks like Far Cry 6, I'm not even going to pick it up. Right? I'm not even going
Yeah.
to entertain it. But if we get a game where we're like, hey, all right, Far Cry 5, Far Cry 6, we got away from the roots. We bloated it up too much. It's time to rein it in. It's time to get something back to basics. We're making a 7 that is more in line with 3 and 4. I'm in. I'm back in, give me a good elevator pitch. I'm back in. But
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Assassin's Creed Mirage seemed to be doing it. Got 77. That seems
right,
to be a return to form. So,
totally possible for you to pull the plane up. It's not like the franchise has been in a tailspin for years, right? Like I enjoyed 5 fine. I don't think 5 is a good game broadly. I wouldn't go back to it the way I like to go back to 3 and 4, but like it was serviceable, right? I didn't dislike it until near the end. And like 6, I bounced off right away. And I feel like if that's the direction we're going, leave Far Cry in the dust for me. But 3 and 4, two of my favorite games. Love them a lot. A lot of really good time,
I
good
really
gameplay
like
system.
4. A lot of people don't like 4. A lot of people say 2 and 3 are the best, but I really like 4.
I like 4.
I like Pagan Min as an enemy.
And
He's a
I think
good
I,
antagonist.
they did a good job of like adding new stuff to be like, hey, like now you can ride an elephant. Now there's a wingsuit. Now there's this, whatever. But like it didn't jump the shark. Whereas like 5, I feel like is where you get to the point where it's like, all right, like it's getting a little too much, too zany, too crazy, too wacky,
Mhm.
And then 6, it was just like we never even touched the ground in that one, right? It was just way out there, and I,
There was just too much there. It was just
too many
too many
systems,
systems, yeah.
and the
It's like, I
tone
don't
was
need to be
off.
making a camp and stuff,
The
you know?
tone was too funky too. Like Far Cry has always been like a bit of that like wacky kind of zany energy, but like what made 3 and 4 so good is that they were grounded, right? Like the stakes in 3 feel very serious. Even when there are moments of crazy over the top action movie stuff, right? Like like the pot field mission and that kind of shit where it's like, this is high octane, crazy triple A. Like,
Mhm,
but then it's like, yeah, but then like the backdrop is like you're trying to save all your friends, right? Your brother's been murdered, right? Like in 4, you're trying to spread your mom's ashes. Like there's a sense of stakes or humanity or something that grounds you in it and makes it feel more serious. And 6 got to a point where it's just like, I don't know, dude. Like I got a dog in a wheelchair that
and a
shoots
backpack
bombs,
that
and
yeah,
it's
it's
like it
like,
just
"What?"
it hit a point where it's like this is too zany. It's gotten too crazy. So
Yeah.
like I'm not excited for a Far Cry 7 out the gate in name up front. Just like, oh yeah, I'm in Far Cry. Next Far Cry, I'm in. I have kind of been pushed, I think, to have reservation now. But so uh, every franchise is always primed for a comeback. All it takes is one good game, right? So the idea that they could produce a Far Cry 7 that, sees the reaction to 6 and was like, hey, like we missed the mark on that one. It wasn't as well received. It didn't sell as well. It's just, it didn't hit the way people wanted to. Let's adjust. Hopefully that's the case, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll reserve judgment until I see it, you know? I don't know what the story's gonna be. I don't know where the setting's gonna be, what fictional country we're gonna be pretending to be in now. So, we'll just have to wait and see, but seems like it might be coming to a Nintendo console for the first time.
Which is interesting as a launch title for Nintendo Switch 2, no less, right? So, according to Universo Nintendo's editor in chief, Necrolipe, or maybe Necrolip, I'm not totally sure how to pronounce your name. Apologies. But we talked about him as a source during one of our Switch 2 stories pretty recently. So, he's a name that's come up in conversation a couple times around this. According to him, Far Cry 7 is slated to launch day one on Nintendo Switch 2 simultaneously with the other platforms that it will drop on. So, theoretically, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, right? We don't know much about the game right now aside from its title, right? We know that the Nintendo Switch 2 is supposed to come sometime late 2024. The current window that's being rumored with Far Cry 7 is fall 2024. So that lines up pretty well, right? With what we've come to expect. The idea that maybe this is one of the big, third party pieces of the puzzle for the launch window could make sense, right? For a number of
Mm,
reasons. Ubisoft historically has had a better third party support relationship with Nintendo than some of the other publishers, right? Like even going as far back as the Wii U. They made Zombie U. They were one of the few third party people to make an exclusive game for that console. Obviously, they've
I
had
mean,
the Rayman.
I feel like they'll put their fingers in any pot, you
Yeah,
know? Like, they'll do
yeah.
anything.
If it makes sense, right?
NFTs? Yeah, let's jump on it, you know? It's like, well, they don't care.
Yeah. Money's money, right? For them. And like obviously Rabbids, right, has been a big success for them over there, at least for the first one. Um, so yeah, I mean the idea that like they would come out and support Nintendo's new console makes sense, but I also think it just like in general makes sense to see more third party support based on what we've heard, right? If the DLSS like does actually enable the Switch 2 to keep pace with the current gen consoles, even just for a couple years, that does close that gap significantly between like what you need to make to have a passable, viable version of your game running on Nintendo's hardware, even if it
Mhm.
is at lesser capacity. And like it reminds me of those comments we heard from Bobby Kotick during the FTC trial, right? Where he was like, it was a mistake to not support the Switch and like not to have the Call of Duty games
Yeah.
there and everything. And that like in hindsight, that obviously makes sense. But
Well,
at the
and they
time
spoke about the fact that it was in those emails that he spoke about the fact that they've been briefed last year on the
on the
Switch
new
2,
console, right?
and that they can definitely get a Call of Duty on there. They can definitely do something with it because it seems to be similar in power to the
Sure.
PS4 from what was being said. I
And,
also
and
think it's important from the rumors that Unreal Engine 5 seemingly runs on this next console
right.
with the demo of Matrix Awakens. We know that if Far Cry 7 is rumored to be moving to Snowdrop, Snowdrop already runs on the current Nintendo Switch, so will presumably run on the next one. They're using Snowdrop for Mario Rabbids. So they don't have to port the Dunya engine. That doesn't need to be moved over to a new console. They've already done the work for Snowdrop, so they can kind of keep going through with Far Cry 7, I would imagine.
So, I guess my question for you is what do you make of this? Do you think that this is going to be similar to like what we saw on the Wii U or to a lesser extent the Switch where there's maybe a short window where you get some of these modern games coming out on the next console and there's kind of this projection of like yeah, no, like our console's it's weaker but like yeah, you can play the new third party games here and then that trickles down and we stop seeing those games come over or do you think it's really gonna be able to match up with these current gen consoles? And, like, is the DLSS solution that we've heard about gonna be enough to bridge that gap?
I think it probably is enough. I mean, the current consoles are targeting 4K. We had Starfield running at 60 frames per second at 4K. I think if you're targeting 1080p instead, you could even notch that down to 720p if you need to. With you can have dynamic resolution scaling go even further down than that if you want to. We've seen some of the later titles go down as far as like 540p on the Switch. So as the console ages, there are ways you can get these games to run. And there's been these like those so-called impossible ports of games that I never thought would ever come to
Like
Switch. Things
Doom?
like Doom, Outer Worlds, Ark got a a kind of redo on its port, which seemingly runs really well now. There's the rumor that Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to be coming over to
Just
the
wanna
Switch.
that rumor has been debunked.
Okay,
It was a misspelling of RDR1.
okay, fair enough. Um, But, that being said, I see no reason why Far Cry 7 couldn't run. Presumably, this will run only on the current generation of consoles, and this will be like maybe a bit of a downscaled version. But, I've run Far Cry 6 on my Steam Deck, and it runs just fine. I expect the Nintendo Switch 2 to be comparable in power, if not even more powerful than a Steam Deck. And so the idea that Far Cry 7 will run on it, I've got no reservations. I think it absolutely will be fine. I think I don't necessarily see it as a launch title for the Nintendo Switch. It would probably be in that launch window in the same way that Skyrim was, but I don't think this is going to be one of those titles that we think of as, oh, this is the launch title for the Switch 2. It'll probably be in that like month or 2 after the Switch releases, we'll see Far Cry 7, and I would not be surprised if Far Cry 7 gets pushed into 2025 anyway. Ubisoft Games get delayed pretty regularly. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Far Cry 7 slip, especially as we've heard nothing about it so far.
Do you think do you think that there's, like, a risk of this turning into a Series S situation where the Nintendo Switch 2 becomes, like, the lowest common denominator, and it's now, like, you wanna hit that benchmark because, obviously, you want your
Mm.
game to be sellable on as many consoles as possible, right? And then it's like, do you go through the effort to take advantage of the highest end on the PS5 or the Series X if ultimately, like, you're gonna be basing the ceiling of what you can do on what can run on Switch 2? Or do you not have that concern based on what we know about this AI upscaling and, like, that maybe we're just at a point where that doesn't matter as much anymore and that, like, the difference between these consoles is maybe more akin to the difference between, like, a mid-range and a high-end PC, right? Where sure, it's gonna run better, it's gonna look better, it's gonna be sharper on your PlayStation or your Xbox, but it runs serviceably on Switch. If you don't care about 4K, if you don't care about 60 FPS, if you're comfortable at 1080, 30, like you can play the new game, you can play the new hotness, and it
Yeah,
comes with you on the
yeah.
go.
I kind of think that's what it's going to be, and I wouldn't be surprised if we find that with DLSS, it's putting out comparable images to the Series S,
Hearing
and that we
Digital
get
Foundry
something.
say that the the difference between DLSS and native is basically imperceptible to most people gives me
Mm.
a lot of confidence that that might actually be a legitimate option for them,
Yeah,
which
I
seems
would
crazy,
genuinely not be
right? Like,
surprised.
when's the
You know,
last time that Nintendo it's GameCube, I guess, right? And even then it's iffy, but like it's been a long time since like every third party game came to Nintendo consoles. It's like not really ever been a thing. And
well, it's been
s-
a long time since they've been on that cutting edge of technology as well.
yeah.
You know, I think the GameCube was there. It was a 60 hertz powerhouse in terms of the games that we got. A lot of them ran better than they did on the PS2, but that didn't matter because people were buying a PS2 so they could watch DVDs, and they had a PlayStation before, and there was reasons why
And
that
there were just
console
tons of
didn't
games that
succeed.
didn't come to GameCube, right? Like stuff like Grand Theft
Well,
Auto or whatever,
they
right?
were
Like
stuck with lower capacity discs as well, which didn't help them. So they really kind of pigeonholed themselves with a lot of things. This partnership with Nintendo, I think, really will prove to be the right choice for them in terms of
y-
power
you
efficiency,
mean
the
with
technology they get
Nvidia?
access to. Yeah, with NVIDIA, sorry. I really think that it's gonna be interesting to see whether ARM versus x86, which is the kind of the winner here. There were rumors in the leak from the FTC and the Xbox leak that Microsoft were looking at potentially ARM for CPU in their next console, and they were going to make a decision in 2023 as to internally what they were going to go down. So it's very interesting to see, and they're also talking about, you know, for the next generation AI powered upscaling similar to NVIDIA's DLSS technology. I think that is going to prove to be really powerful, and a way we get a lot of these games onto the console. That combined with support for Unreal Engine 5 means that people can bring the developers should be able to bring these games over a lot simpler than they did before. And plus, they've also done a lot of the work importing engines to the current Switch. Presumably, that work will continue over into the to being able to play those games on the Switch too. You know, if Ubisoft has already ported Snowdrop, well, then they've done that work and they can make Far Cry 7 work relatively simply.
It's
But
exciting to think about.
I don't think the kind of lowest common denominator really matters. It matters for third party games, sure. But when I think back of the games that look the best, play the best, are the games that really kind of define the consoles, they're the first party games. You know, look at The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh yeah.
Look at what Nintendo's able to get out of their
This
console.
is
Like,
gonna be
it's not gonna
nothing
be
but a
those third
boon
party games.
for the
Yeah.
first party, right? Like the first party games are gonna look incredible. I think it's more the question for me of is Far Cry 7 an outlier in, wow, yeah, that was like one of those third party games that was there at launch. That's kind of neat. And then 2, 3 years later, right, when it's time for, or, 4 years later, we'll say, when it's time for Far Cry 8, does that still run on this Switch too? Or have we hit a point where the gap between those consoles makes that no longer viable, right? We saw that with the Wii U. The first year of Wii U, they were like, Mass Effect 3 is going to come to Wii
Mhm.
U and
Call of Duty
Batman Arkham
Ghosts they got.
City. And was that?
We got Call of Duty Ghosts, and then they just stopped putting out Call
And
of
then
Duty games on that
I think
console.
Assassin's Creed had a release too. So it's like you had those games, but then it was like the next year, it's like, okay, well now none of those
But
games
was that
sold well. They
because
didn't run well. It's
yeah, was it because they didn't sell well because they'd only, like, had they sold
right.
13,000,000 consoles by that point or whatever?
Yeah.
It's like that's probably the reason they dropped support. It's like we're putting in all this effort to sell to a restrictive audience, whereas the
Whereas
Switch 2 is
now,
gonna sell like crazy because the Switch
yeah,
1 sold like crazy, and everyone that's got a Switch 1 is just like, "Well, I want the new one. I
right.
want the more powerful one that can run these games." So, of course, you're gonna put the effort in if you're a publisher to
Yeah.
get your games on the console.
I don't think supporting Nintendo seems like a gamble this time around. I think it seems like, oh yeah, we got to do that because it's just opening us up to this
Yeah.
market that buys games aggressively. And I see that, and I guess the question then becomes like, what are the technological limitations of that? And based on what you're saying, I think I'm inclined to agree. It seems like they might have hit that same roadblock that has historically been the problem. So it's interesting because I
It's
would love to see a future where those of us in the audience that only play on Nintendo, right? Or like that's the primary place you're playing, like they can get into like a Far Cry or they can get into uh Elden Ring or something like that, right? And
I mean, it'd
not
be nice in 2028 not to have to buy 3 different consoles, you know? It'd be wonderful if the majority of games come to Switch and I wanna play exclusives on the PlayStation, so I buy one of those, and it's like, "Oh, now I've only gotta buy 2 consoles instead of 3 to play games in all sorts of different places." It's
just
like
buy all of them. You're better off having all three of them. That's be
I
agnostic.
honestly would love to get to a point where I don't need to. Like, that I can stream the Xbox games from the cloud in
Sure.
2028 or 2030, and I can, like, play the PlayStation games on PC, and I can have my handheld, like, Switch 2 or Switch 3 that plays the Nintendo games and plays the other games I wanna play really well locally. Like, that would be a dream come true. Whether it happens or not is yet to be seen, but I think I could see it a time when it comes to 2028 and the next generation of consoles are out and the Switch 2 is only 3 years into its life cycle, and we've got another 3 years, that we're in the same situation we're in now, where it's just like, I think it's kind of becoming a bit stale because we've got the next generation that's come in. We're seeing the games
Yeah.
that those consoles are getting, and the Switch 2 is no longer getting them. But that's where first party fills in the gaps, I think. That's where Nintendo needs to step up in the same way they have in the last year to give us these like games out of nowhere that we had no idea about and give us the Tears of the Kingdom that we're waiting for years and years and years and truly deliver on kind of the Switch's dream of being able to play home console games on the go.
Yeah.
And I think if it's only first party games on Nintendo, I think that's enough for most people anyway. That's the reason a lot of
Yeah.
people buy those consoles.
I think that's the thing for me is like ultimately I don't think I would ever play these games on Nintendo consoles anyway. Like I think the third party experience is probably always going to be better on PlayStation or Xbox just because they're more powerful systems. And
Well, and they've also got the infrastructure, like, do I wanna play an
yeah,
online game on Switch when I can
no.
have party chat or connect to Discord
Or
and have,
like
like, a decent friends list over on Xbox? No.
Or like other simple shit, like, are you a trophy hunter? Do you care about achievements? Like, are you really gonna, it's like, unless there's an advantage to having the game with you on the go or something like that, I don't know who makes that call, but I think it's more for like, we have plenty of people in the audience that like they only have a Nintendo console or like that's, you know, where they pretty much have to play their games, right? Because they don't have a PlayStation, they don't have an Xbox, they don't have a PC. Those people, I think would really benefit, right? And I would be exciting for them to be able to get in on some of these other, big AAA releases, some of the games of the year that, they've been kind of edged out on. Would be nice.
It would be really nice. I think I could see it lasting a little bit longer than a few years. I think probably until the next generation comes, I could see third party support staying. This Far Cry 7's development probably started on the last gen consoles. Far Cry 6 came out on last gen and it was a cross gen game. I could see that Far Cry 7 started development then. I mean, it takes 6, 7 years to make one of these games at this point, a AAA big game.
Yeah, pretty much.
So there's no way that this game started development on current gen hardware. It was probably already targeting last gen hardware, and they've probably shifted over to current gen hardware.
Maybe. I don't know. The timeline there's rough because that game, think about it, Far Cry 6 came out No, I'd be actually be willing to bet that they did target new gen consoles with this one because 6 came
Depends when
out.
they got the it depends when they got the dev kits for
Sure.
Series
Sure.
X and PS5.
For sure. But like think about it. 6 came out when those were already in existence, right? Because you were playing it on Steam
Far
Deck.
Cry 6 came out in 2021, but we're only 3 years into this generation. They came out in 2020. So if this started development on like, if Far Cry 7 started development on the same timeline that we think most AAA games take, 6 to 7 years, it had to have started before those consoles were released.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I don't think it's on that timeline. I don't think that they started pre-production on this game before 6 was done.
So it's gonna be what, a 3-year development cycle?
I mean, think
That's very short.
the game came out in
2021.
2021, right?
So it'd
And
be
it's
3
supposed to
years
come
next
out
year.
next year. That would be 3 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you already made the point that you don't think it's coming out then, and then it's gonna come out a year
No,
later,
I don't. Yeah,
so
I
then it's
can't see I
4,
can't see
and
it, yeah.
that's a lot more realistic. Because
Yeah,
like, a
yeah.
5 or
We
6
had 5
development.
years between the previous one, I think, came out in 2017.
Right,
So, I would think it was 5 years between 5 and 6.
which I think is pretty reasonable, especially if there's, like, some level of assets you can reuse, like, things like that,
Yeah, that's the thing with this one, it's rumored to be in a different engine, like, how much can you bring over
I don't
unless
know.
they're using assets from another game? Like, I guess they might be
It's a
looking
great
at The
question.
Division and going, "We'll take New York City from The Division and bring that over, and we'll reuse all of that."
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. It makes that timeline seem aggressive either way, right?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe Ubisoft needs to be aggressive and get some games out because they've been struggling.
I mean, there's the argument to be made too, right? That like maybe that game just needs less development time because
Yeah, yeah.
think
Do
about what
do
we
not
said,
put the
like,
camp systems and don't put
yeah,
all of the bullshit with like sending off people to do missions that I don't ever
all
see and
that
they
stuff
just come back
sucked.
and stuff.
It's like that game
Yeah,
was in development for 5 years, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like, I feel like you could cut 2/3 of the systems, and it would be a better game.
yeah.
So maybe that's
Oh, you got
yeah. I just
that
got an
test.
emergency alert. Sorry. Um. So maybe that's part of it, right? Is that like it is
Mhm.
scaled back and like it is going to be. Shut up! Oh my god! Sorry. It's a planned thing that they did, and they needed to send it to me in 2 languages, even though I don't speak Spanish. Which
Mhm.
my phone knows. So interesting to send me 2 of them, but thank you. Anyway, sorry that flustered me the second time. I went through the first one, the second one threw me off. So point being, uh, if maybe they are gonna go the Assassin's Creed Mirage route and be like, what if this is scaled back a little bit? It's more focused. It is less like the map doesn't need to be huge and sprawling like that. Like, I'd argue that Far Cry 5's map was a little too big, right? So it's like maybe we scale it back, we make it
I mean, Far
tighter.
Cry 5 was just also a bit of a boring game in retrospective. Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't find that fun. I don't think America was a great setting for that game.
No,
It just wasn't.
no, and it's like, like I don't know. There's a broader conversation to be had with Far Cry, right? And like the things about it that are problematic, But like, I was so down. I'm like, yeah, whatever, cool. We can do it in America. But it's like, man, like you're asking me to suspend so much disbelief.
Oh, the disbelief that you're not gonna come looking for fucking FBI agent that's, like, all of a sudden gone missing or whatever, and now you're not getting into this area of town 'cause it's been overrun by a crazy cult? No.
Yeah.
Come on. No.
Also, just like the AI in that game was so like busted, where it's like you couldn't stand on a street for like more than 3 seconds without like, there's another wave of guys, wave of guys, wave of guys, and it's like, God damn it, how are there this many people? How is it like isolated rural Montana, but there's billions of fucking guys for me to kill? Whereas like what I thought is so fun about 3 and 4 is like that sense of you being like, I'm Rambo, like I'm alone in the jungle and I'm like
And you weren't a
waiting,
cop, like, you were, like, a normal Joe,
just some
average
dude
person.
like who's
Yeah.
trying to survive.
Yeah.
Like,
That was the beauty of those games.
yeah, it's like you need that fish out of water. And I think it needs to be a fictional country so that you can be like, you can change the rules, and be like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
A
It's like,
fictional country based on a real one, like
yeah,
Far Cry 6 was clearly Cuba, Far Cry 4 is clearly India.
And, like, they could pull that back, though. Like, it doesn't like, I think Far Cry 4 is clearly influenced by India, but, like, was it Karat or whatever I think is the country?
Yeah, something like that.
It's like, how much does that actually feel like India versus, like, 6 is like, it's Cuba, right? Like, this is Cuba. Like, I don't know. It feels, like, very on the nose. Compared to 3 and 4, it feels a little bit more like this could be, you know a bunch of different countries in, like, this part of the
Mhm.
world, right? Like, it feels like it's a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know. Far Cry 7's got an uphill battle for sure, but I hope it's
Like
good.
most Ubisoft games, that's the problem.
Uh-huh.
They've not had many hits.
I'd love to love another one. I'd love to, like, have one that I'm excited for and wanna go to bat for. We'll see what happens. I wanna end on this question today. You know what? Okay. Here's the thing, Steve. We missed last week. We're gonna answer both of these questions. All right. So we'll be judicious with our time here.
Okay, okay.
First one. This one comes from that doc guy who wrote it and said, given that Nintendo will functionally exhaust its AAA lineup of series this year with Mario Wonder, what do you think is next in the pipeline in terms of releases? A new Zelda, a new Mario, a new Pikmin, even? I have two answers immediately. I think a 3D Mario and a Mario Kart are probably two of the games that are next because Mario Kart 8 at this point is a decade old,
Yeah, it's
right?
Mario Kart 9
We
coming
know a
next, isn't
Mario
it?
Kart 9's gotta be
I
waiting in the
actually
wings.
really, really want them to make that a live service game, and I know that's a really daunting thing to hear, but I want that to be
I
Mario
agree.
Kart, just called Mario Kart, and you can just keep adding game packs, keep adding characters, make it so I can come on and there's seasonal things I unlock. It would be wonderful,
Mhm.
and I'd be very happy with
And
that, and I'll
hit me with a Smash Ultimate level of everyone is here. Give me every racer, every,
yeah,
like,
but make
just
it so I
everything.
have to unlock them. Give me a
Yep.
reason to keep coming back to play. I don't want it all there at the beginning
Give
in
me
the same way
season
that they weren't
pass.
all there for Smash. Yeah.
Right? Like, give me like a season pass where it's like, hey, like if you want to get this skin, you got to play this season. Like, do that. Like, lean in. It's exactly what we talked about with Splatoon, right? Where it's like, it. I hit a point with Splatoon where I'm like, why am I playing? Right? Like, for what? Like,
No,
what am I
I was
doing?
exactly the same, and I didn't care about any of the stickers or any of the stuff in the catalog because it meant nothing. It was like, "Oh, cool, okay, whatever. I don't care about any of
And it's
this."
like so much of it was cosmetic, and it's like I look fine. I'm good. Like I feel like I've got nothing left to work for other than being better at the game. And like the
Mm.
online functionality was not good enough for me to want to play like that. It just didn't have a good carrot at the end of the stick for me. And like Mario Kart 8 is obviously fantastic. It has a ton of content. Like, I think all you can really do is just give us another solid game with more shit to do, right? And like, I think you're right. Leaning into a platform, leaning into like acknowledging that this is going to be a game that's going to exist the entire length of this console, and that
And
people are going
probably
to,
into the next one,
yeah,
just don't you don't need to give it a number, just call it Mario Kart, and people buy Mario Kart.
yep, Mario Kart Live or something like that. I don't know. Like, give
Yeah.
it
Or just call
subtitle,
it yeah, honestly, I really would just be fine with Mario Kart, just
sure,
call it Mario Kart.
but I think that's
Mario Kart
definitely,
Ultimate, you could call it that if you wanna
yeah,
do the Smash Brothers thing.
that's gotta be coming though. Like that has to be one of the first
Yeah.
things on the new console,
Oh,
right? Like,
ahead of that, though, it's Metroid Prime 4 for me, like, I really
sure.
think that's probably the launch title for that console.
Yeah, maybe like the cross-gen thing, right, that they like to do with Zelda
I think
usually.
I think most things are cross-gen. I think the current Switch sticks around for a long time. I think at least 2 years.
Yeah, I think 2025 is probably where it is done. I think actually Furukawa said as much, that they're planning to support it into 2025, which is reasonable. Um,
Mhm.
3D Mario is the other one for me, right? Like Odyssey was 2017, several years ago now. The idea that they have
Yeah.
another one in active development, I think makes a ton of sense, right? Obviously, Mario Wonder is right here. That's kicking off a new era of 2D Mario. The idea that you want to follow that shortly up with a new era of 3D Mario and hopefully one, or not even hopefully, but I would say probably theoretically, one that takes some influence from the new style of Wonder or the movies or like kind of like and that could take a lot of different shapes, right? But that could be like more voice acting, right? And like having the characters have like bigger, louder personalities and talk a lot more, like it's something more akin to like Sunshine, right? Or that could
Uh,
be, it could just be whatever the next gimmick is in the way that Odyssey was the next gimmick, right? but I imagine it's gonna be a new fresh art direction, new style, new gimmick, something that is like, "Hey, this is the new era of 3D Mario."
Honestly think Odyssey 2 would be okay, though. You can just go and explore more
You could.
worlds and just, you know, just
I
keep
think it's too
adding
late
to
for
it,
that
add more
though.
characters.
I think if that's what you were gonna do, you'd have done it personally,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, you're probably right. I'd also love a different story that's not Bowser, you know? Something fresh.
something, right? Like, and I again, like,
Like,
maybe
that's
he's
something I love about Sunshine. I know you don't like Sunshine as a game, but the Shadow Mario and, like, the mystery there and the story,
I
it's
just
like
wanna clarify my opinion. I like Sunshine as a game, I just think it's the worst 3D Mario, but saying that you're the worst 3D Mario is like saying you're the worst meal you've ever had at, like, McDonald's. It's like, how bad was it really? Like, it's probably
yeah.
still pretty good, right? Like, it's still it's an 8 out of 10, I would say, by, like, most other games metrics. It's like, that game has some serious problems, I think, that keep it from being
It does, you know, it was rushed through development, but I still think
Mhm.
it's a good game and I still like
Lots
it,
of
and
charm.
yeah, and I really like the story, I like the Ardolfino setting, I think it's good, you know, it's nice.
I would like for them to do something different. I think even if you keep Bowser in the main role, for villain, like, switch it up,
I don't know,
like
like, I liked Bowser's Fury where he wasn't in that role, and it was something new, it was
and it's like he
cool.
was though, but they did it in a different way, right? Like, he's still the main
Mm,
antagonist, but it's not Bowser. It's like Bowser got turned into a monster, you know? It's like
yeah.
they subverted it in a way that made it feel fresh, and I think that's what you need to do. I think even if it is Bowser again, like, it shouldn't be Bowser capturing Peach, right? It's gotta be something else. I'd like Peach to have more agency in the story, kinda like what we talked about with Wonder, like,
I
that
think
I
she
think that would
probably
be
will
cool.
after her outing in the Peach game, what's that called? Peach Showtime? Princess Peach
I think
Showtime?
that's right, Princess Peach Showtime, and then in
Um,
the movie, right? Like the we're getting a new characterization of her as a leading lady rather than a damsel in distress, and I think it would be
yeah.
wise to move away from that. Um,
I
and like
think so,
I'm sure they
it's
won't move
been
away
a
from it
way long
forever.
time
It's gonna
coming,
happen
yeah,
again, but sorry, what'd you say?
yeah. It's been a long time coming, the story's stale, it's
We're ready
boring,
for a new angle.
yeah. I also would love a new IP. I really hope there's a new IP coming because 'cause
We're
it's been a very
overdue.
long time. It's been very, very long time.
It's like Arms, right? Like they did that, and then
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
just
they
like,
tried
okay,
Labo and then the Garage game, and it's like, you know,
I don't really
I
count
guess
that
you could
stuff.
say Snipperclips was one, you could say that Good Job was one if you wanna count those smaller titles, but
They're
we
not
need something new
franchises.
from
Like
them.
they're
Yeah.
games, and like
Mhm.
some of them are great, but like I don't think that's the same, right? Like Arms, Splatoon, like that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's like a new IP that has series potential. And like what my real hope is that they make something that's not multiplayer because I don't really think that's their strong suit. Like I think couch co-op and everything, sure. Like obviously Smash is great, Mario Kart's great, but like I think something that's more traditional would be really cool. I would love to get a new action adventure series with a new character and a new gimmick or like just something that's not oh we're gonna do a shooter, we're gonna do another fighting game. It's just like you guys do not I feel like you've proven that you can't support a game like this, right? Like Arms, I liked Arms a lot, but there's not that much to do. You run out of shit to do very quickly if you don't have people there to play with, and like you can't depend on that. That's not going to build a franchise. And like Splatoon, we got 3 of those in how many years? And it's like 3 is not that different from 1. And
Again,
I
that's where they need to hone in on the "we've gotta make a platform" thing.
yeah.
Because if they'd have made a platform and it was like, you can keep buying map packs, you can keep buying DLC, and you keep getting new modes, like, that's where I'm just like, "You know what? Yeah, I kind of am ready for a bit more Splatoon, and I will
Yeah.
buy the new maps, and I
You
will
want to
buy
keep it as a thing in
the
your
new
constant
characters."
diet, not like I'm going to play it for a few weeks and then burn out, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm with you. I'd love a new IP and I'd love for it to just be something that's like a little bit more traditional, whatever that
Something I
means.
would I would also really like is another Animal Crossing, but I don't know that that's coming for a very long time. So, I will await
I
with bated breath.
mean, let me like I think it's probably a ways away, but like
It's like 3 years, 4 years out, I think.
right? That's probably right, because 'cause I'm trying to think when did New Leaf come out?
But
Was
then
that
I also wonder
2014?
why we need a new one because New Horizons will work on the new Switch. It's gonna look fantastic. It still plays great. Like, it's a really good game. You've got
Oof,
all the
New Leaf was
terraforming stuff.
2012.
Yeah, it was like,
It was 8
almost
years.
Yeah, it was a long cycle.
Maybe we're a couple years away from that. Yeah, I think Animal
Yeah.
Crossing's probably a way off. I think the other ones that you said here, Zelda, Pikmin, right? Those are probably far away. We just got new entries from them both. I think
I'd love a
Donkey Kong
2D
is
Zelda though, like a 2D Zelda
2D
I feel
Zelda I
like we're
could
ready
see.
for.
I think a new Donkey Kong is the other thing that makes sense. We've had that rumor
Yeah.
for forever that EAD's made a team to make new Donkey Kong games. There's a new Donkey Kong movie coming. Donkey Kong is kind of back in the public eye after the Mario movie. I feel like it makes sense to you know close that loop at some point, and whether that's a new 2D country style game, whether that's a new 3D action adventure game, I think Donkey Kong is ready for something new too.
The final point on this before we move on to the next question, I think F-Zero is coming back. We've got F-Zero 99, and I
You think
think
that's
there's
a
a
test in
reason
the
why.
waters kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's a reason why. I think that they doing that as like, "Hey, you were really into F-Zero 99, here's F-Zero GX remastered," because I could see them just bringing over the GameCube game.
That'd be cool. All right, we're going to close things out with this question from Andrew Valentine, who wrote in and said, after I'd finished cry laughing at Phil Spencer's insistence that Nintendo's future is quote unquote off their own hardware, the idea of a takeover in the semi distant future started to feel inevitable. What are the chances of Microsoft buying Nintendo in the next 20 years? What would that look like? And would you, like me, have to quit games if that happened? Well, I'll start by saying uh, I think you can stow those fears, Andrew. I think unless Nintendo's fortunes change in the next couple years, I think they're very safe from acquisition. I don't think it's inevitable because they currently are sitting on a mountain of cash. They have a ton of money that they're just sitting on. They are coming off of one of, if not their most successful console of all time, depending on how the next couple, months, years shake out. I think they're teed up for a successful successor to that console if they play their cards right. And I think when you look at the advancements that they've made in the last year and change, they're only getting stronger and more versatile as a company, right? Like with the Nintendo Land theme park, with the Mario movie generated $1 billion at the box office. That is them as a company that, again, is sitting on billions of dollars and has been strongly profitable this entire console generation, found a whole entire new revenue stream to make $1 billion movies, theoretically, probably a couple times, right? Because we're going to get at least two more Mario movie sequels that will probably do the same, if not better, at the box office. You imagine Zelda's going to find that same success. You imagine that, they've got a couple more at bats where we could probably see a decade of Nintendo movies the same way we saw a decade of Marvel movies, where they're dominant at the box office. And if that's the case, even if all of them are not $1 billion generators, even if they're close to that, that's a ton of new revenue for them coming from areas that previously were not channels of income at all, right? So like for Nintendo to be at a point where they're vulnerable for acquisition by anybody, right? Let alone Microsoft, they would have to have a couple really, really tough years, and like the Switch 2 would have to be a failure in the way that the Wii U was. Like their fortunes will really have to take a turn before they're at risk of being acquired, unless that was something that they wanted to do. And I don't think that that's their goal as a company, because I think they see themselves as uh a pillar of intellectual property in the way that something like Disney is, and that
No,
kicks.
don't compare 'em to Disney, man. Disney is like hemorrhaging cash. Like they've got no money whatsoever. They are 400, they are $48 billion in debt. Disney, and they are having to sell all of their TV like stations. They're going to sell ESPN, ABC's going. They've got no money. The only thing that makes
Yeah,
them money is the parks. Like that's it.
well, the movie industry is having a time right now, but you can't base that on, like, uh that is not really indicative of like their overall strength as a company. It has more to do with the fact that we're living through multiple strikes that are hemorrhaging money for that industry, right? Like,
But you look at Netflix, for example, in comparison to Disney, like, they went from strength to strength, and they still are, and their stock is way up. Like, they knew that strike was coming.
well,
Disney
yeah,
did not prepare for it
but like
at all.
a year ago, we were having conversations about that they might go out of business,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
point being, right? Fine,
I
remove the
I
film
think
industry
though,
from it.
I do think though it's more likely that Microsoft buys someone like Disney than they buy someone like Nintendo, and they take that IP. You take the
No
Marvel IP.
way.
Why? They're not
'Cause
worth much.
yeah,
Disney
come on.
is not worth much in the grand scheme of things compared to someone like Microsoft. Like, they could buy Disney if they wanted to.
No, they
I would
couldn't. Like,
They could. Yeah, they could. I would not be
dude, they just
surprised if
struggled
someone
to
like
acquire Activision.
I alright, okay, I would not be surprised if someone like Microsoft, or Apple acquired Disney. Like, it would be a good purchase for them.
Yeah, it's
You
just it's not gonna
offload the
happen.
parks you keep the bits you want, and then someone else takes those over, you
There's
flog.
no universe where that happens. There's no universe where that happens. And like again, I mean, we're getting off topic. We talk about the games industry, but like you can't look at a company's valuation right now during a difficult period and like ignore the fact that they own about 2/3 of the IP that
Mhm.
are worth anything in the world, right? Like, I mean, come on. You know, like the some of their parts are worth a lot of money, you know?
Apparently, Wall Street doesn't think so at the moment, and I
Well,
don't know
yeah,
why.
because the film industry is not producing anything right now. So of course that's the case. That's my whole point. Is like, yeah,
But it
right
is the
now,
film industry, it's their, like, Disney Plus, they're hemorrhaging subscribers, and,
right.
like, I know
But
that
that
a
all
large
ties
part of
back
that
to
is
exactly this though,
content,
right?
yeah,
Is there's no content being made. So of course
yeah.
they're hemorrhaging money. And like the
But
point about the parks are still making money because you don't need to make new movies for people to go on roller
mhm,
coasters, right? That's it's is what it is. But like that's not something that's gonna hold forever, right? Like we're gonna see that rebound in the next couple years as things start coming out again. Don't get me wrong, they also just put out a couple movies that were big flops. So we'll see what that means. But um point being, I think Nintendo is only becoming stronger as they become a multimedia company rather than just a games developer, right?
agreed. And so I do think that their future is correct, as Phil said, is off their own hardware, and I think that's because they will probably make a lot of money from movies and TV shows and theme parks that is outside of video games. I
Yeah,
think
and
they
it's
probably see they're going through a transition to an entertainment company and
yeah,
not
and
just a video game manufacturer.
I don't think that that's to assert that that means that they're gonna stop making hardware, that video games are not gonna become a focus of their business. I think it's just that they're realizing that there's a lot of money in merchandising Mario and Zelda and whatever beyond making games, right? And that
Mhm,
like a Mario movie has the ability to, penetrate a different market and generate a ton of income and then also just raise the tides, right? Because if the movie's successful, you indoctrinate a whole new generation of kids to love Mario, and then when the new Mario game comes out, they buy it. And when the Mario Legos come out, they buy them. And when Mario's a toy at McDonald's, they gonna get a Happy Meal, right? Like that's the name of the game. And for we've talked about that on Flip Screen this week with Sean Layden, right? Like Sony's trying to do that too, right? There's a reason that they made an HBO series, right? And there were so many gamers being like, "Do we need this? Who's this for? Just play the game." It's like that's not how these things work, right? Like you make the movie or the show or the whatever to get people to go back and play the game that came out in 2009. Oh, and then you just re-released it. That's another reason for them to go and play it. It's like it all feeds back into the games business, right? I think at the end of the day, Nintendo is a video game company, but now they're realizing that you can take the love and the affection that you generate for these IP and explore that in other places, right?
mhm.
Like you brought up the Disney parks. That's that whole model. It's like, oh, yeah, you connected to this movie when you were a child, or you are a child currently, and you connected to this. Now you can go and experience it in real life and give us more money. That's the model, right? And it's like it works. And
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
is the same. Is that I think Nintendo's looking at Disney as to what worked for them and kind of following suit with the movies, with the parks. I also think
just making the
go
IP ever present, right? Like
yes.
it's a thing everywhere,
Yeah,
wherever.
Mario is a Mickey Mouse, like, he is identifiable as a character every child knows at
Mhm.
this point, and it's crazy. I think taking it back to Andrew's question, I could see them buying Nintendo in the next 20 years, but something drastic would have to happen to Nintendo in order for that to happen. Like, the next 2 consoles they put out would have to be a disaster. They'd have to lose shitloads of money at the box office on all of their movies. The parks would have to, like, close down.
Everything
Uh
that's going their way would have to turn, right, for
Yeah, it
them to
would
be
really have to
acquired.
turn. They'd have to do like have to pull a Sega, like it would have to
Yeah,
be a disaster in order for them to be acquired. And I also wouldn't quit games if it did happen. I'd be sad. I'd be sad to see such an iconic company with wonderful IP disappear and be probably rebadged as Xbox. But I
Xbox and
play a lot of
Nintendo.
games. I play a lot of games on a lot of platforms, and they're not all Nintendo games. Like I enjoy a wide variety of video games.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm obviously, you know, Nintendo fan born and bred, but also a PlayStation fan. I'm also an Xbox fan, right? Like
Mhm.
I love the medium so much, and it doesn't have to do with loyalty to any one company or developer or artist or anything, right? Like it's I'm gonna play video games until they stop making them. That's the reality of the situation, right? But obviously it would be a huge blow. You don't want to see that for sure. So yeah, I mean, I would say I think you're pretty safe. I think the idea of Microsoft acquiring Nintendo or anyone acquiring Nintendo right now seems um really hard to fathom. I could see that happening to Sony before Nintendo for my money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what Sony's market cap is, but it can't be that high compared to 103 billion. So they're less than Disney. I don't know what Nintendo's is.
What'd you say
Uh,
was Sony's?
Sony's market cap is 103 billion USD,
Yeah.
and Nintendo's is 53 billion. So they're worth half of
You're
Sony, but
crazy over here
that's
saying you
all of
think that
Sony.
Apple's gonna buy Disney. They've got like barely any cap above them.
What are you on about? Apple's worth 2.7 trillion.
It's not what I'm seeing.
Apple's market cap is insane.
Let me see.
Search for the market cap, not the stock valuation. Apple's worth
Oh,
$2.7
that's what I'm seeing.
trillion
Okay,
dollars.
okay, okay.
Like, they're worth a lot of money. Like, they could do a stock swap and just, like, take them, no problem.
Yeah.
If they really wanted to, they could. And since Bob Iger came back as CEO, he's been, like, talking about flogging everything. He's like, "Yeah, we got 48 billion in debt. We really need to start clearing some of that shit. So, we're gonna have a fire sale. Who wants ESPN? Who wants ABC? You buying? I'm selling."
Yeah, man. So I mean, what's Nintendo's market cap? Oh, we're looking at it.
53 billion USD.
I mean, come on.
But they've got 18 billion in stock. So that's the problem. Like, they got 18 billion in cash. So it's like, what do you do with that? They could buy it if you can't do a hostile takeover, which is what Phil was talking about in the email that Andrew's
Right.
referencing. They can't do a hostile takeover because they've got 18 billion in cash. Nintendo could just buy the stock themselves, and then no one else can buy it because they own the stock. It's off the market. So at that point, it becomes untenable for you to be able to acquire them through that means.
Right. Yeah, which is like what we're saying, right? It's like they would need to blow through all that cash for that to even be a possibility.
Yeah. Well, someone did the math on Reddit. I did a quick Google. They'd have to lose $250 million a year, and they could do that and still have enough money in the bank if they lost $250 million a year to stay in business until 2052.
Oh my god. That's crazy. That's crazy. They could fail for 30 years before it was a
Yeah.
problem. Oh my god.
It makes me wonder what their plans are with that much money. Like, yeah, it's a bit of a war chest against a hostile takeover or an acquisition, and probably part of that is they're worried about the Saudi investment fund. coming in and buying more stock. They probably wanted to have a bit of a war chest against that.
Yeah.
But are they planning to acquire anyone? Are they planning to, like, invest this in something else? Like, that's a lot of money to just keep in the bank.
I mean, that's the thing, like, they have been quietly spending and investing, it's just I don't think that they're, like, going on a spree like that, you know? It's like think about it, like, they started their movie studio. That was a serious investment, right? Like, they made inroads there. I'm sure that they spent money and resources towards the partnership with Universal and developing the park and everything, like, they are using it. I think it's just like I mean, like, do they need to spend a bunch of money to go acquire another studio and then have to manage a whole other like, it's like, why rock the boat, right? Like, it works.
Mhm.
Their product is, their primary product, right, is the Switch, which is a massive success. They sell it at a profit. The library
And
is
they never sell their games on sale. They always sell them at full price,
they've not had to do a
and
single
people still
price
buy them.
cut for the whole
Yeah.
generation. The value of it and the cost of it has only gotten better as inflation has gotten worse. Like, I feel
They're
like
in a
it's like
really strong position.
it's
They're
like
in the
why rock the
strongest
boat?
position. They're in the strongest position, I think, of the 3 platform holders by far.
Yeah, easily, right? Like, again, if Xbox didn't have a war chest, like, they're owned by one of the biggest companies in the world. They can do whatever they want. Sony obviously is not, right? Like, PlayStation is a huge part of their business and their success, and it's
Yeah.
definitely more precarious and more volatile than Nintendo. Because again, at the end of the day, I think, and this is why I was bullish about the Disney thing, right? Is that like IP is valuable. IP is more valuable than anything. Period. And
100%. Yeah.
leveraging
And
IP well is what Nintendo does.
I still am amazed at how cheap they got Star Wars for. Like,
It
all of Lucasfilm for. It blows my mind.
no sense. No sense. For what they got Marvel for in retrospect, right? Like Marvel was like a struggling company at the time. It makes sense that they came out the way they did, but it's like you're telling me that Bungie is worth more than Star Wars. Okay.
And Indiana Jones, like, they got Indiana Jones with that as well. It's like, come on.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure it is.
They probably made the 4 billion back already on
Probably.
Star Wars.
Dude, yeah. Are you kidding me? They added the Star Wars section at the Disney World
Yeah,
parks and stuff.
yeah. There's,
They
like,
made that
1,000,000
money back
Star
in
Wars
fucking
TV shows.
merch. In just merch, they made that money back. No question. Since they
Yeah.
bought it in like what 2015, 16, whatever. There's no way they haven't made $4 billion off just the rights to like, yeah, you want to buy, yeah, a million just shirts, toys, like go build a lightsaber in Disney World. Cost $200. Like, there's no fucking way they haven't made that money back, man.
It's insane. But, George Lucas walked away with 4 billion, so it's like, yeah, he's happy.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit, right? Like, it's sure he's fine. He's doing great. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah. So to put an opinion on it, don't worry about it, Andrew. I think we're good. I think you far more likely to see Nintendo gobble up another company than vice versa.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. I don't think they will though. They'll buy, like, smaller studios, support studios, but they won't buy IP. Then they never seem to care about that.
No, I think unless there was a scenario where like another company that like I think if Bandai Namco was struggling, I think they would acquire them because like they have a relationship with them and it's like, yeah, great, cool. We'll own Tekken, sure. Like whatever,
And
right? Like,
Pac-Man.
sure, yeah. Um, I could see something like that, but barring that
The
situation, that
problem with those kind of companies, though, is, like, it's everything else that comes with it. It's like they've got their fingers in arcades and anime and
yeah.
toys and all of that other shit, and it's
You
like,
sell shit off though.
yeah, you can't have to, or just take the bits that you want when you buy in the first
Hmm.
place.
Yeah. It's like you said, right? You sell off the parts that aren't relevant to your business or aren't profitable and take what makes sense, keep the development studios, keep the IP.
Yeah.
Because again, that's what it's all about, right? It's IP. That's why Embracer Group's just been writing checks for all this time for seemingly for nothing, right? But they're like, if we own all the IPs, we'll figure it out. It's their whole
Yeah.
strategy.
I mean, Amazon quietly does it as well, you know, it's like own own MGM and James Bond, and it's kinda crazy all the stuff that these companies just snap up, and you don't even realize who owns it at that point. It's like, "Oh, who owns that again?" Yeah.
It's like one of 3 companies. It's not that
Yeah. It's like, "Oh, yeah, PepsiCo." Yeah,
it's
they bought it.
probably Disney, and if it's not them, it's probably Warner Brothers, and if it's not them, yeah,
Who
whatever,
knows?
Amazon,
Amazon,
Netflix, whatever.
Netflix, Apple, yeah, one of them, you know,
One of
they've
those
got it.
other losers.
Mhm.
Anyway, so there we go. We gave you a double long episode today. I hope it made up for last week.
Yeah, sorry about that again, you know?
Hey,
And
it
Max will be
happens.
on to talk about Switch 2 at some point, because no doubt this ain't the last time we're talking about Switch 2.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, gang. So thank you for joining us here for another episode of Nintendo Noise. Remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on this or any other episode of the show, make sure you hit us up. Questions at flipscreen.games. Come join the Discord. Keep the conversation rolling between episodes. However you choose to get involved, flipscreen.games is the website where you can find links to all the places we are and all the ways that you can get involved and show your support. However you choose to get involved, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nintendo Noise. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.